Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O's, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
all in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O's, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. The Eye Test with Pierre, McGuire, and Jimmy Murphy.
The Stanley Cup winning Colorado Avalanche And after 22 years, Raymond Mark!
The sickest NHL podcast. It's gonna be sick.
And welcome to another edition of the Eye Test. Jimmy Murphy here with Pierre McGuire on the Sick Podcast Network, and we are excited for another great episode here. We're now only 3 days away from the trade deadline, Pierre. Things are starting to heat up. Lots of chatter around the league. Little craziness in the Bruins game last night.
Okay, stop. For those that don't know, the visitors' bench in Toronto is not very large, okay? Like in Montreal. So in Montreal, if you don't see the goalie on the bench, it's because he's sitting in the visitors' runway.
Yep, or in the Zamboni entrance sometimes. Yep.
Yeah, but in the visitors' runway where they usually sit, because they usually have a stool there for them. Yep. That's where they also sharpen the skates, by the way, in Montreal for the visitors. In Toronto, the goalies very seldom sit on the bench. Mm-hmm. They sit just down from the bench. So I get it.
Yeah.
But to be fair, I'm not sure Donnie Sweeney was trading Linus Ullmark in the middle of a game.
No, unless they somehow snuck Brandon Bussey in as a backup or signed one in Toronto or got the e-bug. But yeah, that's what happened last night. And for those that aren't aware, Jack Edwards, the play-by-play man for NESN, he either forgot. I don't know how he was unaware because he's been to that arena so many times. I have not been there in a long time, Pierre. So I'm gonna own my mistake of biting on. Hey, what's going on?
No, it's not a mistake. I just want people to understand. Like, I get how that can happen.
Yeah, but
it just shows you how things can spiral out of control real fast.
So let's tell you. So listen. So he says on the broadcast of the Bruins Leafs, I think it was early second period. He says that he's noticed that Ullmark has not been there for 5 minutes, doesn't know what's going on, equipment issue, injury, what have you. And of course, with everything that's good, this goes into further how things spiral and get out of control. And it's a whole bigger story with Ullmark and Swayman. So let's stop right there and preface by saying earlier in the day, Elliot Friedman wrote his 32 Thoughts column that he writes for Sportsnet every week.
Which is excellent.
It's a great column. Does a great job. Yep. Very, very insightful. Awesome information. Obviously, very well connected. And what he did, for everyone not knowing out there, you can go check it out. It's up there now. He broke down each team, starting from the teams out of the playoffs all the way down to the top team in the NHL, which would be at this time the Florida Panthers. And the Bruins were third to last there as they're the third best team. And when he did the little Bruins segment on what's going on with them heading into the trade deadline, he just casually mentioned, hey, I'm hearing they started talks on a contract extension with Jeremy Swayman, and that's it. And then he went into why Ullmark's name is out there and explained it in the same way we have here on this show. Well, a radio talk show host in Boston, Pierre, I'm not going to name names because I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but a radio talk show host on a very big sports station in Boston, so do the math if you're familiar with the Boston media scene, decided to say, yes, I can confirm Elliot Friedman's report that the Bruins and Swayman are close on an extension, and here are the numbers. And then went and said, and I think I mentioned this yesterday, right? Because I said there was this stuff floating around.
You did.
But he presented it as if, A, Friedman reported this, and B, it was fact. And he presented numbers, term, year, whatever. And so obviously everything's heightened going into that game on what's going on with the goalie situation. So when Jack Edwards says he's missing from the bench, social media erupts and wonders what's going on. Has he been traded? Well, they're not going to trade their backup goalie if they don't have somebody to come in. I mean, what if Swayman got hurt? But Pierre correctly texted to me later. He didn't see my text at the time. I said, did you see this? And this morning I woke up to a text from him saying, hey, that's because they sit in the runway there. And sure enough, Ullmark was sitting in the runway. And if you check his Twitter feed and the Bruins Twitter feed, was hilarious. After the game, they said, hey, here's Linus Ullmark in Scotiabank Arena hugging Jeremy Swayman. And oh, by the way, he's been here all night. And then Ullmark, I don't know the wrestler's name. I'm not into, I think it's The Undertaker. Ullmark, I don't know wrestling, man.
I don't know.
Undertaker, but he was coming up out of a coffin as if he had been back from the
No, but
It was classic.
what was surprising to me was how quickly people pounced on it. And it just shows you that when you are reporting stuff, you've got to be so careful.
Double check.
Because everybody's just so there's a heightened sense right about now, especially because of the trade deadline, right?
Yep.
And look, Jimmy, you've been on top of the story. I want to compliment you. The way you've handled the story on Olmark, you've been on top of it for a long time, but you haven't been disingenuous about it. If you don't know, you don't write it.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And you've done thorough research. You've had sources, and you've sourced it out. And there are times when I have to say, "Okay, Jimmy, take a step back."
Yeah,
and you do. But you know that I really admire the way you go about your business, and it just shows you got. And I tell my kids all the time, like when you're putting stuff out there, you just be careful.
Yeah,
just be careful. Know exactly what's going on.
Yep. And so credit to Elliot Friedman. I was happy he did
100%.
So Swayman was asked about all this after the game, and Swayman said, "Hey, I have all the respect for Elliot Friedman in the world, but I'm just going to leave all this to my agent. I don't really want to talk about it." So then, it looked like maybe Swayman was a little upset. So Friedman immediately came out on the Jeff Marek show today, and Jeff Marek's a good mutual friend of Pierre and I. It's a great show. And he comes out and he says, "Look, I just want to clear things up because I didn't mean to set off some firestorm. I never, ever said they were close." And I went back and I read what I wrote, and that's what I wrote. I said, they're just talking, and they're not close right now. And that's that. Yeah. So it just shows you. Yeah.
You just got to be, again, just when you put stuff out there, you just got to be careful. Yeah. It's okay.
But I felt bad for Elliot, Pierre, because I've been in
so I'm going to just step up and defend him. Okay?
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
First of all, he's not a malicious person.
No.
Second of all, he is as professional can be. I've worked with him starting when he started out, just so you know. He was working at a small cable network in Toronto when I first ran into him. And this is back probably in the late 1990s. And to see where he's grown his brand to this day, it's because he's honorable, he's professional, he's unbelievably hardworking. And I will tell you this, he's a gentleman. He's a true gentleman. He's not going to report something that he doesn't think has major credibility, and he has done a lot of background on it. He's just not going to do that.
Yeah. And so credit to him. He came out and made sure to clarify, hey.
Yeah, but that's good.
People put words in my mouth, and that's one thing, Pierre. It's not just sports. It's politics. It's everything today. Eh? Like people just twist people's words to suit their narrative, and then all of a sudden it just, that's what happened. No, this isn't.
Try working in the Olympics doing an event and see how that is.
I can't imagine, especially with some of the countries that are very, let's say, I don't know, ruthless. It could be the word.
Anyways, the truth of the matter is, Boston was awesome last night.
They were.
They were really good, and Swayman was when
the other side too.
Pardon me?
I want to talk about Toronto after we.
Yeah, but Swayman was good when he had to be, and he didn't have to be often, but when he was really good. The team in front of him was excellent. This show's called The Eye Test.
Thank you.
I told this to Jimmy before when I was driving to where I am right now. I said, "Listen, Jimmy, I'm going to tell you a player that was an eye test player last night, and he had 0 points. He was a dominant menace in the game, and it's Trent Frederick.
Yep.
With 5 hits in the game, he was an elite penalty killer. He created all the flow early in the game for Boston. That's what I mean about an eye test player.
Yep.
Well, he'll get no credit analytically for anything. Zero. But if you really watch, I want you tomorrow when you get a chance to ask Coach Montgomery about the influence that Trent Frederick had.
Ask him tonight, Pierre.
You can ask him.
Once this show's over, I'm getting on the train to go into TD Garden for Bruins Oilers, which I'm really excited about. And he's speaking at 6:10 p.m. Eastern. So I was just going to say to you, I'm going to ask him about it because nobody else will. I know they won't.
No, I'm just telling you, Trent Frederick in that game, especially in the first period, set the trend. And the Bruins, to their credit, follow suit. Now, I want to share something that Jimmy texted to me too, because it's important. We were talking about the lack of number one center for the Bruins, and clearly there's no distinguished number one center. Charlie's been great. Pavel Zacha had an opportunity. He's been good. A very good game offensively last night, obviously. But Jimmy made a point that I hadn't thought of, and it's a great point, Jimmy. I compliment you on this. Think about it. David Pasternak's season and the way he's performed offensively, it's taken away really that huge need for a number one center.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of masked it, a little bit, Jimmy. And I think that's a really relevant point that you raised to me last night.
Yeah, he's become a playmaker. Well, he always was, but he's now realized, hey, I have to take that aspect of my game to another level to compensate for the loss of Bergeron and Krejci.
Case in point, the second goal the Bruins scored, that's a Pasternak pass.
That was unreal.
And that's right through a maze of players. Yep. And it starts off with a really nice play by DeBrusk.
Yep.
And Jake was good last night. I thought Jake was really good last night.
I was happy for him. He was. And I thought the whole team was good, but we'll get back to them later. Let's talk some Metro Division right now.
Yep.
And we'll go right to another great game that was happening at MSG last night, and that's the Panthers and the Rangers. Coming on right now to join us to talk about that on the eye test is Arthur Staple of The Athletic. Arthur, how you doing, my friend?
Good, guys. Nice to see everybody.
Arthur, great to see you. Awesome to see you, my man. I miss you. Miss seeing you.
Yeah, miss you too. It's been a long time.
Yeah. So how we doing?
All good. All good.
Yeah, good. So your take, Rangers lose that game last night, but we all know, the Florida Panthers right now are running on cylinders. So what was your take on seeing that team, currently the best team in the NHL, up close, and what stood out to you about maybe from the last time that you saw them live in person?
Just the way that they operate, there's a ton of skill, obviously, and there's a ton of edge to their game. Everybody plays with it. It's a real credit to Paul Maurice, because I think at times last season, 2 seasons ago, they just weren't it didn't feel like they were a 60-minute team. They'd show flashes of it, but it wasn't complete. And they feel real complete. Obviously, you see the way that Sergei Bobrovsky's playing, and that's, goaltending makes all the difference when you can get consistency out of your goalie. But just the way that they're up on the play, they're up in people's faces. They can really blend kind of the edgy after the whistle stuff with, the kind of skill, like the play that Barkov made on Reinhardt's first goal.
Amazing.
There's 5 guys in the league that can make that play, maybe. And I think from the Rangers' perspective, the record is really good. They've had a lot of good seasons to go around, starting with Artemi Panarin, who's been, MVP caliber. He's not going to win it, but maybe you get a few 5th place votes, which would be an accomplishment given who else is going to be on that ballot. And that line with Vincent Trocheck and Alexis Lafreniere, who's really stepped up in class this year. Igor Shesterkin's been, had a shaky couple of months, but has been lights out. Jonathan Quick's been a real revelation. Adam Fox coming back from injury. Their big guys have been big for them all year long. But I think when you see guys like, whether it's a Ryan Lomberg for Florida or an Eetu Luostarinen, Rangers don't have those guys. Yeah. They have a collection of guys that are maybe even some of them kind of punching above their weight class. Guys like Will Cooley, who's been a bit of a surprise this year, 11 goals, throws his body around. Everybody's talking about Matt Rempe. Johnny Brodzinski earned himself a one-way extension at age 30 after being pretty much a bad guy who's, a bit of a tweener for the first decade of his pro career. Nice stories. But this week, I think, even with all the good the Rangers have done in the last month plus, has that game, I think, particularly exposed that if they want to be a conference finalist, a Stanley Cup finalist, they need to add to their depth, especially up front, because it's just not quite, that Final Four level that you need to be at.
Pierre?
That's what I was just going to ask you, Arthur. What do you have to add if you're Chris Drury to get your team over the hump?
I think, and we could find out in a matter of hours, whether it's 24 hours or so, that Alex Wenberg could be a Ranger. It seems like they're the team that's been the hottest on his trail, and it sounds like that deal is going to go down at some point. I know Colorado's shown some interest. I know, Jimmy, the Bruins have shown some interest, but it feels like the Rangers have identified, with Philip Hedl out, they need a number 3 center. I think Wenberg is a versatile enough guy. He does a lot of different special team stuff. He can be a matchup guy. They've got Mika Zibanejad, who does it all as a number 1 center. He's not having a terrific year 5-on-5, but he's still a point per game guy. Mm-hmm. Vincent Trocheck's having a great year, his second year in New York. They need somebody who's a legit 3C, can kind of anchor a line that's either a checking line, provide a little bit of offense. It's just been something that's been missing. So Wenberg makes a lot of sense. If it's not him, Adam Henrique makes a lot of sense, depending on cost. And I think there's still, you look at the past two deadlines for Chris Drury's first 2 years as GM, they had a ton of cap space and kind of that surprising 21-22 year. They went out and added perfect pieces, really. They got Frank Vetrano for nothing. He slotted in with Mika Zibanejad and had a great run in the playoffs. They get Andrew Kopp, kind of their big addition. He was a top sixer and scored some big goals in that postseason. Even a guy like Justin Braun and Tyler Mott added stuff. And then last year, Vladimir Tarasenko was a good addition. I think they maybe got a little too greedy with the big names and getting Patrick Kane not even close to 100% health. And that's really where things started to fall apart for them last year. So this year, I think you're targeted. You get a 3C. You see what you have cap-wise remaining. I know Vetrano's been on their radar for a while. That's gonna cost them. It's really, it's really a debate. I think internally they're having: do they give up their first-round pick, which even though it's going to be in the 20s and it's maybe not the deepest draft, you give up your first-round pick for a guy can maybe make Zibanejad and Chris Kreider that first line more of a force. Give them two really good lines at 5-on-5, which you're going to need for a long playoff run. So whether it's Vetrano, I don't know if Jake Guentzel makes a lot of sense for them if you're talking about wingers, but 3C, right wing, I think those are the places that they need to add.
Jimmy, I just want to ask Arthur one more question, and that is, I know you covered him when he played for the Islanders, and now you're covering him as an assistant coach, obviously, with the New York Rangers. How big of a difference has Michael Pekka made on this team? Because I'll just tell you, the Rangers were not a good face-off team last year. They were not. They're a real good face-off team this year. How big a difference has Michael made there?
It's a big difference. It's a really defined coaching staff. I think Peter Laviolette been a coach in this league a long time in a lot of different places, and I think he's learned what works and what doesn't. And I think Kevin McCarthy, who was with him through a lot of his stops, won a Stanley Cup with him in Carolina, didn't bring him with him this time. And I think the way that he went, Phil Housley, who'd been with him in Nashville, Dan Muse, who was a guy who has worked with pretty much every good young player coming out of the U.S. national program, including Gabriel Perreault, who's having a great year. Rangers draft pick this past year, who's was leading the NCAA in scoring for a long time, and he's a guy who's has future head coach written all over him. And then you've got a guy in Pekka who really did a great job in Rochester his couple of years there, kind of dipped his toe into coaching with Laviolette during the COVID year, kind of being the guy who ran the extra guys through their paces in Washington. And I think as Pierre, that a guy that no one was as respected as him as a player. Always carried himself the right way. And now I think becoming, the power play has tailed off a little bit the last couple of months, but it started out, it's a great group of power play guys they have on that top unit here, but he's coming in with some different ideas, face-offs, special teams. It's a good group that Laviolette's assembled. And I think the way that they started off, sometimes with a new coaching staff, with the guys that have been here a long time, you're feeling your way a little bit. They were 18-4-1, and it's made the hugest difference for them. They struggled through December and January. They were a 500 team then, but they didn't really lose much ground because such a great start and guys really embracing the way that Laviolette, not just in his coaching staff in terms of on-ice systems, but a guy who brings team together. They have monthly team building things, poker nights, all the families are involved. I think anybody who's played for Peter Laviolette before knows what he brings in terms of that off-ice stuff, trying to bring everybody together and get them as a tight-knit group right from the start. And it seems to have worked quite well, and they were able to really weather kind of an ugly couple of months and still be a team that's a top 5 team in the league.
Yeah, you mentioned Jonathan Quick there, and it's been a great addition for them, and really I'm so happy for him to get that extension and everything he's been through to get back on track and the success he's finding. But I want to focus on the other goalie there, the guy that really is how he goes, the Rangers will go in the playoffs, and that's Shesterkin. And in your eyes, what was missing from his game during, I won't call it a slump, but let's just say he was lost for a bit. He wasn't himself. What was missing from there, and how much has he corrected that in the past 2 to 3 weeks?
I mean, it's been a big correction. I think he was out a couple of weeks in November. Minor injury, but really having a guy like Quick, who got off to such a great start with them, was huge in terms of allowing Shesterkin to kind of ease into things. I think just breaking down some of the data, he'd given up, I think, more goals. He'd given up maybe 35 goals, high glove side, through January and had given up maybe 30 all last year. There were some specific things in his game, whether it's mental focus, confidence. He definitely went through a stretch where he was giving up goals in bunches, quick one after the other within a couple of minutes of each other. And that's not technique. I think that's just the space between your ears, which is always the most important for a goalie, especially in the NHL, especially a guy with his pedigree. So, bit of a reset. He went to All-Star, but he didn't play the game before they left for All-Star. Didn't play the first one out of the break. So it was about a 14-day break that he had then to be able to reset. And obviously with a goalie coach like Benoit Allaire, who's worked wonders with a lot of guys, not just the big name guys, but you see Jonathan Quick, a guy whose technique and structure is all over the place as a goalie. He's totally old school. And here he is taking advice from Benoit Allaire, and suddenly at 38, he's earning himself an extension. He's pretty much guaranteed to get to 400 wins. And I don't think anybody would have said that watching him play last year in LA. So, I think the combination of factors for Shesterkin really put him back on track, and his numbers in February, underlying numbers, just, he's almost 100 points higher save percentage in February than he was the previous 2 months. It's been an impressive turnaround, and they've needed it because they haven't really tightened up defensively just by the data. They're still giving up a lot of chances, especially off the rush. And I think he's just been better. And obviously the confidence, you want the confidence to flow from the goalie, outwards from the goalie, and into the goalie with your team. It's really flowing out from the net right now. And I think the Rangers have to hope with whatever they do this week. They've obviously bought themselves plenty of time sitting at the top of the division to fix whatever they need defensively in their structure, but they certainly put themselves in a good position. And Igor Shesterkin being the guy to lead the way, like you said, it's the most important player for them going into the playoffs.
Hey, Jimmy, it's interesting. That guy, Benoit Allaire, he did pretty good things with a guy from Sweden, Lundqvist.
Heard about the Hall of Fame with him or something like that?
He is a little bit okay. Arthur, I got to ask you, you had 2 coaching changes in the tri-state area. One on Long Island, Patrick Roy comes in, and then yesterday, Tommy Fitzgerald lets go. Lindy Ruff, who I think is a tremendous coach and a really good guy, and brings in Travis Green, who's a friend of mine. So it's kind of a tough situation. First of all, let's talk about Patrick Roy, the way he's influenced the Islanders so far.
I think from a standpoint of not just the guy who's got the resume that he's got as a player, and somebody that a lot of these guys watched growing up, I think the concepts that he's brought, trying to change some things, even talking to guys in the first couple of weeks that he came in, these are drastic changes for a team that played the same way under Barry Trotz, then into Lane Lambert, who was Barry Trotz's right-hand man. So it was 5+ years of playing the same way in the defensive zone, quantity over quality, allowing things from the outside, trying to just keep the house safe. Patrick Roy comes in and says, no, we're going to be aggressive. We're going to play this kind of hybrid man where go and steal pucks, get going the other way with speed, be aggressive up the ice. And it's an older team. And I think it takes a little while to turn that ship around. And certainly they had some ugly ones since Roy took over, some inconsistent games. You think about the outdoor game, what a big lift that would have been if they'd pulled that off and beaten the Rangers and kind of got themselves going. They blew the lead late, had a mess of an overtime on such a big stage. So, that game and a couple of games after that, emblematic of the ups and downs, blowing leads. I think they've blown a 2-goal lead 15 times this year out of 60 games. It's remarkable numbers to see a team that's good enough to take a 2 or 3 goal lead and then not good enough to finish it off. It's hard to fathom, and it really was the thing that cost Lane Lambert his job. So I think with Roy, he comes in not just as a Hall of Fame player and a guy that commands respect on that front, but a guy who's very open with his players, very direct with his players, wanting to see them succeed. Guys like Matthew Barzal, he's got him playing with Bo Horvat and Brock Nelson, but stacking that top line those last few games, really trying to push a team that doesn't create a ton and have a big top line. I was talking to Barzal this morning. He said it's a little like Tampa when you face them with Stamkos, Kucherov, and Point. You pay so much attention to trying to shut those guys down that you get beat by the Brandon Hagels and the Anthony Cirellis, and you see Kyle Palmieri the other night against Boston with a hat trick in the first period. So the concepts are pretty elaborate for a mid-season change, but I think you've seen in the last week that they're starting to take hold, and maybe it's enough to get them into the playoffs, and maybe they can make some noise when they get there because they certainly got the goaltending to do it. But it's going to be a big lift these last few games.
Pierre, Pierre, you can answer this too because you know Lou Lamoriello so well. But I'm just wondering, guys, as you're describing what's going on there and how they've switched to an up-tempo game there, and also how this team can blow leads so often, right?
I think he froze.
I see that.
We'll get him back, Arthur. So before we get back to Jimmy, let's talk about New Jersey. Were you surprised at all?
No, it just felt like it was going that way. That you could see, I think, the games in Anaheim and LA, especially the one in LA, they score 15 seconds in, and then I think maybe they had two high danger chances the rest of the way. LA really stifled them. It just seemed like a team that was out of ideas. And it's not, like you said, it's nothing against the guy who's going to be in the Hall of Fame as a coach. Lindy Ruff is one of the best and one of the good guys around. But you don't get saves. That's obviously the number one coach killer, and they've got three guys, and none of them are really produced much of anything. I think they're all in the under 900 save percentage. You lose Dougie Hamilton for the year, the same year that you let Damon Severson and Ryan Graves walk away. It's a lot of experience. Maybe not the guys that you'd pick to be your top three of your top four defensemen, but big changes. And losing Hamilton, you like what Simon Nemeth has done as a young guy. You like what Luke Hughes has done, but still, two teenagers on your back end is not really a winning formula in terms of being a high end defense. And then you don't get many saves. That's usually what ends up with the coach being fired. The shocking part to me, I think, and no knock on Tom Fitzgerald, because it certainly sounds like when you talk to people, he's been trying for over a month to get them a goalie, is if they had maybe made the deal and bit the bullet and sent the assets to Calgary for Jacob Markstrom in January and December, would we be sitting here talking about the Travis Green taking over? Maybe not. Maybe that would have been the thing that solved their problems. But they definitely have taken a huge step back this year, and it does happen to teams when they have that 1 year where they take a big step forward, and maybe people aren't expecting it. Once you get expectations on guys, things can crack a little bit. So it definitely seems like it's happened with them.
Jimmy, just let me finish up on the Jersey side, then you can go to your full Lou Lamoriello stuff. So I'm shocked, Arthur, because I thought Andre Palat would go there and make a difference, and he hasn't. And I think most of the other pundits thought that Timo Meier would go to New Jersey and make a difference, and he hasn't. Why haven't those two guys been better in Jersey?
It's a good question. I feel like, really the structure with that team, they really found a lot of success last year, letting their high-end guys be high-end guys, playing that incredible tempo with guys like Jesper Bratt and guys like Jack Hughes, and adding Meier, can play at that pace, but also adds a little bit of edge to his game. You saw the way that he and Shesterkin got into it during that Devils Rangers playoff series. You felt like this was a team that had plugged the right holes, and seeing them this year just not be able to get into games. It seems like almost they can score goals, they give up way too many, and it's demoralizing. I'm a friend of Steve Valiquette's, and his data site is invaluable to me. And I think the number that he likes to throw out is if your goalie gives up a low danger goal, you lose 85% of the time. And I think you don't even have enough fingers and toes to count how many low danger goals the Devils goalies have given up this year. So it can just be demoralizing. I'm sure you remember as a coach that your goalie gives up a bad one, the air just goes right out of the bench, and now you have some data to back it up. So I think you really start in goal, and that you've got a core that's really talented there, but still very young and inexperienced, and it's hard to overcome that. You've got a captain, Nico Hischier, who's out for a while. Even guys that you don't necessarily think are key guys like Jonas Siegenthaler who missed some time. I think it was just got buried under the avalanche of injuries and poor play, and that's how we ended up where we did.
Oh, he doesn't turn on his microphone now.
Oh boy.
Neophyte, turn on your mic. He's really good at this job too. I think he's just having a bad day. So I'll ask you about the Islanders and Lou Lamoriello. Are you surprised where the team is right now?
No, I think they've got some flaws in this team. He's as you know, he's always looking to add pieces. I think maybe the off season was not his best, where you commit to guys like Pierre Engvall and Scott Mayfield, who do you need those guys for that many years, even to keep the cap hits down? Scott Mayfield is a guy that going into unrestricted free agency last year, if they had tried to, unload him at the deadline last year as a guy who was a top 4 shutdown type defenseman, could have had 5 or 6 different teams bidding on him. And now really he's a number 5 guy on this team because Noah Dobson has really emerged as an elite defenseman. And you could probably get a number 5 defenseman for a couple of years and a little bit cheaper than 3.5. And now Mayfield's really been hampered by injuries this year. He went on LTIR today. So it's been kind of a lost season for him. So those were some missteps by Lou, but I don't think he's a guy who stands still, obviously, when things aren't going the right way. He made the move to fire Lane Lambert and bring in Patrick Waugh now about 6 weeks ago because he still felt like this team could succeed. And I think in the next 3 days, now that he's got some cap space with Mayfield on LTIR, maybe he'll decide, a minor addition, another forward who can bring some energy and has a little bit of speed to add to that middle 6. You look at teams like San Jose or Chicago that have pretty much everybody up for sale. Maybe there's a move to be made there. Maybe a guy like Oliver Wahlstrom, who hasn't really panned out the last couple of years, could be moved out. You bring in, say, a Luke Cunnin or somebody like that who kind of fits that Islanders mold of hard edge, but a little bit of skill. It's funny. A couple of people have said to me, they're a team that's built for the playoffs. The problem for them is just getting there.
Getting in the playoffs.
Yeah. Maybe not built for 82 games anymore because they're getting up there in years, but certainly a team that if they can get in and in an Eastern Conference outside of maybe Florida, you're not really scared of anybody. It could be interesting if they get there.
Arthur, I'm going to be totally blunt with you. I never thought the Philadelphia Flyers would be in a playoff position with a quarter of the season left to go. Did you think they would be?
Never.
No.
And I love John Tortorella as much as you do, and he is a fantastic, interesting guy. And the way that he coaches, a lot of people would consider to be old school or obsolete. But you see this group of Flyers, they've completely bought in. And, whether it's injuries or low expectations, transition to Keith Jones and Daniel Briere taking over, the Carter Hart situation, which could wreck any room, and maybe even knowing that his name had been discussed as one of the people that was involved in this situation. It's a lot, and they've held together all the way through it. And I think they're certainly helped by teams like the Islanders and the Devils and Pittsburgh and Washington not really being successful for any amount of time, any consistent way this year. But we'll see. And, I kind of feel like they've said the right things, Jonesy and Daniel Briere, about we're still on this path. We still need to be able to build the right way. And so we'll see what happens in these next 72 hours. But if they decide to sell Sean Walker or Nick Seeler or even Scott Lawton, I would bet that they might fall out of it, but who can keep betting against them the way that they've overcome what they've overcome this year?
Arthur, this has been fascinating hockey talk. Is there one team that's been a major disappointment to you?
It feels silly to say because they've provided so much disappointment, but Buffalo Sabres, it's hard to watch what's going on there. You even see now where Kyle Pozo seemingly, has maybe gone to management and said I'd like a shot somewhere else. And he's a guy who made a huge commitment to them coming out of the island, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, to be part of what they were going to build back up. So many good young players. It's just surprising that they can't put it together. It's it seemed like this year was a competitive year in that division. Detroit's come out of their shell and done well. Tampa's kind of sagged back a little bit. Toronto wasn't a real sure thing until recently. So it seemed like there was an opportunity for them. And it's amazing to see now we're going on 12 years without the playoffs. And as we all know, such a passionate fan base and close to Toronto, even the Canadian markets want to see Buffalo succeed just to give a boost to some local rivalries, and it's just year after year you see the same thing. They have a good stretch, they have a bad stretch, and just end up out of it before before the New Year is even really that a couple weeks old. It's a bit of a Groundhog Day up there every year now.
Hey, Jimmy, we're past the tri-state area. We've moved on. Now we're in upstate and actually Western New York. So take it from there, Jimmy.
All right, so we're talking about the wonderful Buffalo Sabres. One name I'm hearing out there, guys, a lot is Casey Middlestat. I know you've mentioned earlier the Rangers might need a center. Is that something you think maybe Chris Drury could look at?
I think, and I'm quoting Elliot Friedman, I think they checked on Middlestat. I think they inquired on Alex Tuck, which would be quite a big deal to try to pry him out of there. Middlestat, I would imagine that there's a chance he'll be on the move. I don't know that they feel like for what the Rangers want, which is, like we said, number 3 center, whether he can be kind of that consistent checking guy. It seems like it's been a roller coaster the last couple of years for him, and maybe a change of scenery would be good. So I don't know if it's a right fit for the Rangers. I could see maybe in the off season, if they're, if the things don't go the way the Rangers want in the playoffs and they're starting to revisit some things, maybe have a little bit more clarity on what's going on with Philip Heedle's future. Maybe then they can revisit that one, because I imagine whoever they get in the next couple of days will just be purely a rental.
The guys I'd want out of Buffalo right now, I'd want Dylan Cousins for that job.
Yeah,
that's the guy I'd want.
Yeah,
and I feel like a guy like Peyton Krebs could use a change. He's a guy. At least I'm sitting here at UBS Arena. I feel like he's a guy that could help the bottom 6 for these Islanders. A guy who plays bigger than he is. Younger. The Islanders' 4th line is all getting up there in years. So I kind of wonder if the Sabres get to the off season and maybe decide that this group just isn't working. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
All right. Well, listen, I apologize for my technical difficulties, but we appreciate you coming on. We really do. Keep up the great work over at the
Arthur, awesome. So good.
Great.
Yeah.
Great to see you guys. Thanks again.
Thanks,
All right.
Arthur. Take care. Thank
Arthur
you.
Staple joining us here from The Athletic on the eye test, as well as the gremlins in my computer. Breaking right now, and thanks to the people in the comments section there, to Jesse and to Randy, Chris Johnson just tweeted this 9 minutes ago, Pierre, with the Canucks believed to be among those pursuing Jake Guentzel. Word is they've had discussions about potentially flipping Elias Lindholm to the Boston Bruins as part of the machinations to make it happen. Nothing concrete is in place at this time. There's still a lot of moving parts. Whoa.
Well, no. I just got off Pittsburgh radio before I came on with you, and I told our friend Mark Madden that I thought there are 4 teams that were really likely have an opportunity to get Jake Guentzel. One was Colorado, one was Edmonton, one was LA, and the other one was a team called Vancouver. And who would know him better than the Vancouver Canucks? Nobody. Because Jimmy Rutherford and Patrick Allvin and Rick Tocchet and Sergei Gonchar and Mike Yeo, where did they come from?
Wow.
Where did they come from?
Exactly.
How come it takes so long for this to be figured out?
To connect the dots. I know.
I mean, anyways, I'm not surprised. It's a perfect fit. I don't know, again, what they do with Elias Lindholm, but you and I talked about it. Lindholm fits perfectly in Boston. Mm-hmm. He does. He fits perfectly in Boston. But, there is a thing called the cap, too. So and I'm talking about for Vancouver more than I'm talking about for Boston right now.
Yep.
So, but is that a good fit? The answer is yeah, it is. Jake would be really good there.
That would be, it's really interesting. I saw somebody talking about this the other day, Pierre, was how, since Lindholm's got to Vancouver, he's almost been more of a complimentary player, which is fine. They want to insulate him, want him to filter into the lineup, make the adjustment, not put all the pressure on him right away. I get it, but it was almost the person speaking. It was just, somebody on Twitter was just making a good point. They don't necessarily need him when you look up the middle.
No, that's
there's
fair.
Other teams out there that need him more, and one of them, as you just mentioned, is the Boston Bruins. And
the Bruins
were after him. The Bruins were after him. They were in on it till the end. before he got traded to Vancouver. So very interesting that if
it is. No, I think there's some merit to this point too. I do. This is one of those where we're not going off the deep end saying, "Oh, this is going to happen."
No.
Does it fit? Does it make? Yeah, it does. All the moving parts make sense. So it's not just speculation. There's actually theory behind it, and I like the fact that Chris actually put that out there because I do think it makes sense. I heard about it a couple days ago. I just didn't want to speculate on Guentzel, but I did think there were more than just one or two teams, obviously, that would be interested. And when you do the whole thing, it's I never thought about it before, but somebody says, "Why do you think Lindholm ended up in Vancouver?" I said, "Lots of reasons." He goes, "Who was a general manager in Carolina when Lindholm got traded or drafted?" I was like, "Oh, Jimmy Rutherford." I was like, "Yeah,
there you go.
I got it. I get it."
Exactly. Got to connect the dots. All right. Well, listen, before we connect the dots, I want to talk about how you connect your appetite. And that's our good friends at Factor, our new sponsor, Factor Meals. Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals make eating better every day easy. Wherever tomorrow takes you, be ready with pre-prepared, chef-crafted, and dietitian-approved meals delivered right to your door. You'll have 35 different options a week to choose from, including keto, calorie smart, vegan, veggie, and more. And there's even more to enjoy with over 55 nutrition-packed add-ons that help make your weekly meal planning even more delicious. What are you waiting for? Get started today and have a feel-good week of meals ready to go. You want to go over to factormeals.com/itest50 and use the code itest50 to get 50% off. Again, that's code itest50 at factormeals.com/itest50 to get 50% off. And Pierre, I know you have stormed through your
done
package that they sent already.
It's over. It's gone. We finished last night.
You liked it that much?
Melanie and I devoured them. Yes.
Good stuff.
It's good.
Stuff. I love it.
Very good.
I love it. And before we get over to our comment section and the questions there, I want to remind everybody there too. Now, I'm still waiting, guys. So we gotta hound them. Get it here to Waltham, Mass. But I'm looking forward to getting my Manscaped package, Pierre. You know why? Because it's Irish month. Top of the morning to you. This episode is brought to you by St. Patrick's Day Shamrock Shavers Manscaped. This year, don't chase rainbows. Make your own pot of gold and groom your little leprechaun with leaders in below the kilt care. Say goodbye to your clover forest with Manscaped Lawnmower 5.0 and let your confidence shine bright. Embrace the luck of the Irish and join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped. Head over to manscaped.com and use the code ITEST for 20% off plus free shipping. Again, that's ITEST for 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. All right, Pierre. Now we got.
I used mine. I told you.
You did. I know. And look, I got a little 5 o'clock shadow coming in here, so I can't wait to get mine, and all sorts of things going on. Pierre, I'm Irish, but I'm also Italian too. And I can't really get the sleeves up, but I got the hairy Italian arm. So Manscaped, I got the Italian hair and the white Irish skin. It's not a good combo. So Manscaped will come to the rescue for the Irish Italiano here. We'll see how it does. But let's talk about, okay, so we got to that. That is
Arthur was great, by the way.
He was great too.
Arthur was really informative and really good takes.
Well, I didn't get to here because of my my gremlins here. But what I was trying to get at, and I think you started to kind of pick it up as well, Pierre, when you were talking to him as I was off, was just how much does this change Lou Lamoriello's approach, not just to the deadline, to this offseason, when he sees that a lot of the young players are responding well to Patrick Roy's up-tempo approach, more offensive approach, as opposed to the stereotypical Lamoriello neutral zone trap or defensive games. Does that change his approach to constructing this roster as we go forward?
Yeah, I think it has to if Pat's going to stay as a coach. And I think obviously Patrick's going to stay as a coach. So I would say yes. They don't have a roster outside. We talked about, the supersizing of that top line, putting all three centermen together with Barzal and Horvat and obviously Brock Nelson. And it's worked for them. That line's worked for them. Now, one of the reasons why they're able to do it, and Arthur didn't tell us this, but I'll tell you, is because they have J.G. Pajot.
Mm-hmm.
but there are rumors that JG Pageau might be moved. So so if they move him, who's coming in to fill JG Pageau's spot? And I can tell you right now, you talk to anybody in the American Hockey League, there's not a lot of stuff going on at Bridgeport right now.
No.
Where their farm team is. There's just not enough stuff going on there. So they're not prospect rich at all. Their best prospects are playing college hockey right now. 2 of them were on the U.S. World Junior team, which is great, but they're down the road. They're down.
Yeah, for sure. And Pierre, you bring up JJ Pageau. One thing is if he does get traded, don't expect it to just be, for picks and prospects. Lou Lamoriello did tell the media, we are not sellers. So he's looking just like a lot of GMs right now to make hockey trades that help him now and in the future and also match the cap fit that he has there on Long Island. So that should be good. Let's open it up to question. But quickly before we do, one more thing, Pierre, too. I want to bring up our good friend Bob Morgan, who keeps sending us wonderful this day in NHL histories. And 10 years ago today, Pierre, and you know what? I remember vividly listening to you on Mitch Melnick's show as I drove home from doing my own show up in Montreal at this day on 2014, March 5th, 2014, in what was believed to be the first ever NHL trade involving both team captains. Do you remember what trade it was?
Oh, that was a few. Go ahead. Remind me.
Okay. The Tampa Bay Lightning traded their captain, Marty St. Louis, to the New York Rangers in exchange for their captain, Ryan Callahan, a conditional pick in the 2014 NHL draft, and their first-round pick in 2015.
So that was a trade. If you go back and look at that was a trade that worked out well for the Rangers because they got to the Stanley Cup final.
But it worked out well for the Lightning, too.
It worked out long-term for the Lightning.
It really did.
It did. I mean, can't pretend. It did.
That was a great hockey trade.
It was a hockey trade.
Yep.
The Lightning went to the 15 final. They lost to Chicago, but I think that's when they started to get rolling. They had the setback against Columbus where I think that's probably the best Tortorella ever coached. They got swept by Columbus, and then all of a sudden Tampa woke up. But I would say that trade probably – and then obviously when Ryan McDonough left New York and went to Tampa, I think that kind of solidified everything for Tampa Bay.
Yeah, and it's great. For Marty St. Louis, and I know he's coaching Montreal now, but now I don't know, Pierre, if he had, sort of a foundation in that area in terms of living there prior to that trade. But since that trade, you know how well he just filtered into that hockey community in Connecticut, in the metro area, and the contacts he made. He did some coaching, and then he ended up as the coach of the Montreal Canadiens. So that worked well for him as well.
It did. His wife that he met at University of Vermont, she's from actually Fairfield County.
Okay, so he got that.
He got traded there. They were already in the process of building a house in Connecticut. I just won't tell you the town. I don't think it's appropriate to tell you the town. But, and then he got involved in a youth program called Mid-Fairfield where my son was involved and, I was involved. And you think about Jonathan Quick played in Mid-Fairfield. Max Pacioretty played in Mid-Fairfield. Cam Atkinson played in Mid-Fairfield.
Yep.
And there is a plethora, of guys that are playing or close to playing in the NHL now or are playing Division I college hockey that were all part of that Mid-Fairfield program. That is, a lot of people are jealous and they call it the evil empire. I'm just going to tell you, it's an elite program.
Amazing.
And it's really well run. It's extremely well run.
I would argue, and people will probably disagree, but I'll just argue that them and the Junior Bruins out of Marlborough, Mass, are two of the best in the Northeast for sure, with the amount of players that they've placed in colleges and eventually the pros as well. So, All right, let's open it up to our questions here. All right, Jesse Jimenez says, Sweeney potentially plucking Lindholm for 70% of the original value would be quite the chess play. Hannafin may be the sexy name, but you got to think Boston has Chikrin's camp on speed dial. Interesting, Pierre. And there have been some whispers that Chikrin is back on the market, that there's teams inquiring on a regular basis right now. I know you worked with him, so you don't have to comment directly on that, Pierre, but just your thought on the Sweeney chess game that Jesse speaks of. I think he's right. That would be a real.
It is, but I think there must be some divine intervention there because of the Guentzel becoming available.
Yes.
I don't think Donnie knew that Guentzel was going to become available. So the fact that Guentzel's available, I think it enhances the ability of whomever gets, if they trade Lindholm, it enhances the ability just because they're not trading Lindholm if they can't get Guentzel.
And Pierre, one thing before we go to the next question too, and you and I always talk about this, and we love to credit scouts. And one thing I want to say there, and I don't know this for a fact, but I imagine this might have been the case, is, we've mentioned to our listeners and viewers here how a lot of times the scouts obviously are the boots on the ground. So they're in these arenas, and the Bruins have scouts in the Northwest there, scouting the Canucks, scouting the Flames, all those teams up there. And I imagine that Sweeney had his guys just keeping tabs on certain things like this, certain developments that could come about, and, circling back, even if it's with a different team, with a player that they already had interest in. So, I don't know off the top of my head who those scouts are, but whoever they are, if they are able to pull off this trade and get Lindholm, they deserve a lot of credit.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. You're always watching, though. You usually your coverage is pretty thorough, and you can also watch the games on tape too, which back in the day you couldn't always do because not every game was broadcast. Yeah, right. So it was a little different.
VHS, right, Pierre?
What's that?
VHS, right?
No, there was a lot of VHS. A little different than what it is now. But no, I think there's a lot of merit to what you're saying, Jimmy. And the truth is that they probably had a substantial book. We're 2 years divorced from the best line in the league being Elias Lindholm, Matthew Tkachuk, and Johnny Gaudreau.
Mm-hmm.
Did we all just forget that?
Yeah, and think how much has changed since then.
That's what I'm saying. It's not like 5 years. It's 2 years.
2 years. It's amazing.
It's unbelievable when you think about it. So, anyways.
The trade that shook the NHL for years to come. All right, next question. Mm-hmm. Andre Maniason, I hope I pronounced that right. Do you see Lou back as GM if they miss the playoffs on Long Island? Think it's time to move on for him?
Well, I'm never going to speculate on anything with Coach Lamoriello. Just the respect I have for him and the amount of time he's been in the league, both in the NHL and in college hockey. And I think that if he wants to stay, he'll probably stay. If he wants to go, he'll go.
Exactly.
But I would say this is that you need to make sure if you're the Islanders, you're keeping up with the speed quotient of the game, especially if Patrick wants to coach the way that he's coaching right now. You need to, as a manager, you need to add those kinds of assets. And I'm sure that if everybody's back with the Islanders, they probably will have that discussion.
All right. Next question. David Robinson, in your experience, did you see the Bruins consistently playing up to compete with and defeat good teams while dropping games to lesser teams is a good sign or trouble as they approach the playoffs? David, I'm completely with you on that. I've been saying this to Pierre all season. That is one of the biggest problems of the Boston Bruins is that they play down to and up to the level of their opponent, and that won't fly. I'm with you. I think it is a problem going into the playoffs.
I agree it's a problem. You don't want to play a B game one night and a D game the next, or an A game one night and a C game the next. That's not how you win in the playoffs. You got to be consistent. You got to be able to elevate from that consistency, not bottom out or drop down. You got to elevate up from the consistency. So it's not a good sign. That being said, last night impressed me.
It did.
That was a play guilty kind of game by Boston last night. It was a play guilty game.
Well, and Pierre, if you look at it too, and by the way, I just want to mention Dave Robinson, by the way. We had that conversation about Kenny Linseman last week being a surfer. Yeah. Dave's one of our buddies from that surfs up in the Hampton, Seabrook area in New Hampshire with Kenny Linseman and my good friend Jeff Pilbo.
Oh, that's cool.
Shout out to him. He's watching from Portugal, Pierre. In Portugal right now. So
I hope he's having a nice glass of rouge and some paella. That'd be good.
Oh, yummy. All right. So maybe we can get Factor to do some paella. There we go.
Paella and a little rouge from the Factor.
All right. Next question there. But there is a great point, Pierre. And one thing about that game last night, too, you looked at their schedule, too, and they're going right back at it in
Edmonton tonight.
Edmonton, and then Toronto again on Thursday. That if you don't like to say there's must wins in the regular season, but to me, that was a must win, and kudos to them. They got
100%.
All right. Next question. Jeffrey B. The Devils are apparently not shopping Toffoli finally. However, their team looks very fragile on D without Dougie Hamilton. Who should they target to help out their defense? Pierre?
Well, first of all, Ryan Graves went to Pittsburgh. Damon Severson went to Columbus. Dougie Hamilton's been hurt. They've got huge, they're trying to break in Simon Nemec, young 19-year-old kid. That's not easy to do. They're breaking in Luke Hughes, another 19-year-old kid. That's not easy to do. So there's been a lot of foibles on the back end in terms of growing their brand. And the Dougie Hamilton injury really set them back. Who should they target? I think stoppers on the back end. They've got more enough with Nemec and Hughes. You got a lot of skating power and puck moving power and offensive capability. You need some stopping power. And that's not a knock on Brendan Smith. And it's not a knock on the guys that they have in support. That being said, I think they need to be better in that position. They just need to be better.
Yeah, and I will say, too, excuse me, Pierre, I'm not trying to knock Dougie Hamilton because what he is, he's very good at it. He's a great puck-moving defenseman, great power play specialist as well. But he's not exactly the best defensive defenseman. Let's call
that's not his thing. But he moves a puck and he can shoot and he helps their power play. So the guy they really want to take the next step is Kevin Ball, and I think he's starting to get there, but not there yet. That's what I'm saying. They need to just enhance a little bit, and I think they will. Tommy will figure that out. Tommy Fitzgerald will figure that out.
We'll figure it out. All right, let's go on to the next question. Marvin Matthews, Edmonton. Oh, yeah, that's right, Pierre. I meant to ask you about that. Edmonton, Sammy Gagner, sure looks like they're prepping for an addition.
Well, first of all, what a career for Sammy. He's played over 1,000 games in the league. I will never forget during the 2007 Super Series, Milan Lucic was on that team. Johnny Tavares was on that team. Sammy Gagner was the best player at that point on that team. And I remember we spent 21 days in Russia, had a lot of success. That team played 8 games against the best Russian U18 or U20 players. They won 7 of 8 and tied 1. I mean, it was an amazing team. And Sammy was a big part of it. And I remember right after we got back from Russia, we did this tour across Canada, and Edmonton brought him to training camp. And I think they were having training camp in the Northwest Territories, if I remember correctly. He made the team coming out of camp. And everybody's like, oh, this is a great revelation. We went, I hope he gets through the first 2 months. We just spent 21 days in Russia and another 8 days crossing Canada. Then he goes right into camp in the Northwest Territories. I've always been a fan of Sammy Gagner. And you know what? As good a player as he is, and he was a great player for a long time, he's a passionate hockey man and a really good person. Great teammate. Really good teammate.
That's what I was just going to say. I always hear the one common thread I hear about him is great teammate. That's always been.
I'm just going to tell you, that trip to Russia was tough. It was heavy. You asked Lucic if you get a chance. I was heavy duty lifting for everybody that was on that trip. And Sammy and Milan and Claude Giroux, those guys, Johnny Tavares, they were really, really special. They were really special. Marchand was on that trip. You asked, right? You asked Brad.
I asked Brad. Yeah, I'll tell you, I'd love to go back and find some video of that, Pierre. I'm going to have to scour YouTube because
David, you know who the guy, the revelation on that trip was? It was David Perron.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
He was the big revelation because he's the first guy. It's a pretty amazing story. He went from being a Tier 2 midget player to playing Tier 2 junior to playing major junior. This is in a 3-year thing of consistent, and then being drafted in the first round and playing in the NHL the next year.
Wow.
No player's ever done that.
Yeah.
It was 1, 1, 1, and in.
Jeez.
Pretty amazing.
That is a rapid ascension for sure. All right. We got time for one more here because I got to catch the train, my friend.
Yeah, you do.
Yep. Got to get in there. Randy Workman, do you believe in these rumors, Allmark to Kings rumors? I believe there's a good fit there. I don't know how much has been, I can't confirm how much has been discussed between the two teams, but I think it makes a lot of sense for the LA Kings. I really do.
If I were Colorado, I'd have something to say about that.
Yeah, Pierre's on the Colorado, Allmark, and I don't blame him. They could use a goalie as well. We'll see what happens. All right. Well, listen, I want to thank Arthur Staple. Thank our production crew for rescuing me from the gremlin black hole that I was in there. Man, what was that? That was, Pierre, what happened too?
We need to change your provider.
Yeah, no, I did. You know what happened? What I'm scared about right now, Pierre, is that the laptop just shut off and went back on its own. as I was starting that question, it just went whoop. So I'm a little worried about the laptop. We're going to get that checked before we go to Montreal. It's called Murphy's Law, buddy. It happens. It's real. Anyhow, we want to thank Arthur again and thank our production crew. Thank all of you in the comments section there for all your great questions and all your comments. And thanks for the updates there, too, on that Chris Johnston tweet regarding Elias Lindholm and the Boston Bruins and Vancouver Canucks. This has been another edition of the Eye Test here on the Sick Podcast Network. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Eye Test with Pierre McGuire and Jimmy Murphy on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.